Chapter 7. Death and Rejection. Friends, you can choose, but family, you're stuck with them no matter what. Char, named Sycamore of the Grove. Covelin stood on the roof with 6 yards of chain looped around his arm and the rest of it lying at his feet. His muscles complained beneath the heavy metal's weight, but he wouldn't need to hold it for long. The Sathagate was directly beneath him, still snarling at the doorway. Crossing a section of the chain over itself, he created a big enough loop to fit around the Sathagate's head. Keeping the loop held out in front of him, Covelin leapt off the 4-story building. He flew just over the beast, threw the looped chain around the Sathagate's neck, and landed on its shoulders. The creature instantly flailed, but Covelin held tight to the chain to keep himself in place. He straddled the Sathagate, digging his knees into its sides as he pulled the chain tighter around its throat. The metal dug into the beast's wounds, tearing at the scales. Howling, the Sathagate clawed at Covelin, catching him in the face with one of its talons. The icy claw tore through his helmet and his skin, sending blood splattering everywhere. Covelin couldn't tell how bad the injury was, and he didn't have time to register his pain. Finagling a better grip on the chain, he threw one end around the Sathagate's claws, looped it around itself, and pulled it tight. The beast tried to pull the claw away, but the section of the chain between its wrist and the neck was only a few feet, making it impossible to lower its arm. The Sathagate tried to grab Covelin with its other hand, but Covelin took the opportunity to loop the other end of the chain around the beast's second claw. Half blind, and with its claws now connected to its head, the Sathagate began to flail more aggressively than ever. Covelin held on to both ends of the chain, trying to keep the creature's arms held back. Howling in frustration, the Sathagate jerked its arms apart. Covelin held on as tight as he could, keeping the beast's arms from separating. The Sathagate pulled even harder, determined to break free. With a small grin, Covelin released the chain. The Sathagate extended its arms out in both directions, pulling the chain so tightly around its own neck that the metal tore through its scales and severed its head completely. With a release of blue light and mist, the creature toppled to the ground, its head rolling several feet before coming to a stop, its jaws still wide open. Covelin fell with the beast. He allowed himself to roll off of it and slide to the ground, where he chose to remain, taking in deep, ragged breaths. "Not so bad, Covelin," he muttered to himself as his vision blurred. He could taste blood running into his mouth. The wound on his face was obviously severe. His body must have been in shock because he felt very little pain. Collapsing beside the Sathagate's corpse, Covelin tried to gather his wits. After a minute or so, he realized it was hopeless. His limbs had lost their strength. He had lost a lot of blood. The world was darkening around him. "Not a bad way to die," were his last words as he lost consciousness and fell into oblivion. When the sun rose, Gwenevere was determined to find out what had happened. She left a very bewildered Hexter, who she had told almost nothing to, and marched out of the healthy hearth. Drawing Lawrence's sword, she tentatively made her way down the streets of Midfeld, listening for the Sathagate, until she came to a stop in front of her house. The scene that met her eyes caused enough nausea to almost overwhelm her. The Sathagate lay sprawled in the street, with its dismembered head a few yards out of place. Its claws looked to be chained together. Covelin lay against the creature's side, covered in blood. His helmet had been torn in half, revealing an awful gash that ran down from his ear to the bottom of his jaw. One of the Outlander's arms had also been savagely mangled. Gwenevere raced to Covelin's side. "Outlander! Oh, come on, you can't be dead!" She checked for a pulse and listened for breathing. She found neither. "You're supposed to be immortal or something! Come on!" She shook him, but Covelin didn't stir. He looked paler than life would admit. "He's an Outlander," she thought in a daze. "You shouldn't be upset. Everyone wants them dead." Her hand strayed to her abdomen. "Do you think we're demons?" She heard Covelin's voice echo in her memory. She never responded to his question. No, I don't believe you're demons," she told him, shaking him by the shoulders. "You had no choice in the matter. You were born an Outlander, and that was that. You saved my life. You can't die. Not you too." Gwenevere hung her head, letting the tears fall. First Cecile, and then Ravon, and Lawrence, and now Covelin. Everyone that ever cared about her eventually left, for one reason or another. "Oh, stop your crying, child," an irritated voice snapped from behind her. She turned to see Jinx standing in the destroyed doorway of her home. He gave her an annoyed glance. "He died saving our town," she sniffed. "I know you don't have a heart, Jinx, but you must admit he was a good man." The old butler waved a dismissive hand. The beast wasn't here to destroy the town. It was here to kill you, my dear. Covelin thought it wanted me alive, Gwenevere replied, not sure which prospect frightened her more. She stood and turned away from the Outlander's corpse, forcing herself to stop crying and face Jinx. I am going to see my father now. No, Jinx replied, a nasty grin covering his face. Your father has sent me with a message to you, Gwenevere. Gwenevere felt a pang of hopelessness hit her hard. A message from her father while she was standing right outside? That could mean only one thing. You're too much of a danger to keep around, my dear, Jinx sneered at her. Look at this monster. If you remain with us, only more of the same will arrive, and next time we won't have such a valiant knight to fight for us. His dramatic accentuation made Gwenevere shake with anger, but she dare not interrupt him. Therefore, your father has commanded you to leave Midfeld and never return. He will offer you no solace nor protection. Jinx's eyes flashed with fiery delight. You're as good as a devil yourself, Gwenevere. Leave us at once, or risk expulsion by force. From what I've heard, this monster killed nearly a dozen people on its way through Midfield. We wouldn't want any more innocent lives lost because you were too stubborn to get your dangerous presence out of town, would we? Giving a dreadful cackle, the old butler turned and disappeared back into the mansion. Gwenevere slipped to the ground, eyes wide in shock. It was as if her heart had stopped working. She knew her father had never really cared about her or Lawrence, but to throw her out? Is this how you felt growing up? Gwenevere thought, glancing back at Covelin's body. Rejected, hated, scourged, all for something you had no choice about. She let her tears flow freely, casting aside Lawrence's sword and tearing at her hair. Without her father's protection, she had nothing. Nowhere to go, nobody to help her, no place to call home. And Jinx was right. More monsters would probably be coming after her. With Covelin dead, and without her father's guards, Gwenevere surely wouldn't last a day. Weeping to herself, she stayed on the ground, letting the hopelessness overwhelm her. Char slammed his book shut so suddenly that he almost startled himself. The action was certainly loud enough to jostle Aspen and Oak, who had both dozed off on either side of him. What happened? Are we under attack? Oak yawned groggily, reaching for his sword. No, Char replied hastily. I've just found it. I know what happened to Gwenevere. Indeed? Oak murmured, rubbing his eyes. My, how long have I been asleep? A few hours, Char said. He leapt to his feet, moved around the extra chairs crowding his desk, and bolted for the door, taking his book with him. Mahogany must be informed at once. Wait, Sycamore, what is it? Aspen asked, rising sleepily from her chair. What did you find out? It's the Outlanders, my friends, Char replied enthusiastically, as if he were declaring a national holiday. That's how they're created. How? Oak asked, shaking his head to regain his senses. A woman who conceives on the night of a lunar conjunction will bear an Outlander as her offspring, Char said excitedly. This knowledge is ancient, unknown to even most of the wise. Wait, conceives? Aspen asked. Like, gets pregnant? Yes, of course, Char replied, holding up the blue-covered tome in his hands. Our young Gwenevere made love to some poor fool the night of the last lunar conjunction and became pregnant. She's bearing an Outlander in her womb, and not just any Outlander, no. Char's excitement faded, and a concerned interest entered his eyes. 500 years ago, the last time all of the signs in the heavens aligned just as they did at the most recent lunar conjunction, an Outlander was born 9 months later, but he entered the world with great power, more than any Outlander before or since. According to the most far-fetched legends I could find, this Outlander was the power that brought about the beginnings of the Chill. You're saying another superpowered Outlander is about to be born? Oak asked. All grogginess was forgotten. He looked to be in perfect clarity now that the world was in danger. Yes, but that's not even the strange part, Char muttered. He was pacing now, talking to himself more than to Oak and Aspen. The signs in the heavens didn't prophesy this event, but they caused it. What do you mean? Aspen asked, sounding like she didn't know if she should be worried or excited. Outlanders can only be conceived during lunar conjunctions, because that's when the moon's powers are all aligned. Char replied. "It's the only time when all 5 moons are in the sky at the same time. That occurs once every 20 years, and that's a special event, generating enough magical energy to create an Outlander. The stars and planets, while they don't hold as much power as the moons, are magical in their own right as well. When not only the moons align, but the constellations and the planets as well, the amount of magical energy that convenes is astronomical, and all of it becomes concentrated within the tiny forming body of an unborn child." So Gwenevere was simply unlucky enough that she slept with a man the night of the last lunar conjunction, which also happened to be when all of the heavenly signs lined up, for the first time in 500 years? Oak summarized. "Was it luck?" Char whispered. "My dear friend, I think not." "You think she planned it?" Aspen asked. "It's all lining up too well," Char replied. "She just happens to conceive a child on the night of not only a lunar conjunction, but the only night in 500 years when all 4 constellations are in alignment, as well as every planet in the heavens. And then she happens to have a sage nearby to help her survive." "You do think she planned it," Oak murmured. "She wanted to have a supercharged Outlander for a child." "Either she planned it, or someone else did," Char said. "Either way, we have to find her. Any word from Willow?" "Last we heard, Gwenevere was on her way back to Midfeld, along with another man, possibly a bodyguard," Oak said. "Good." Char turned and threw open the door. "Let's just hope we find her before somebody else does. Send word to Willow. Move in on Gwenevere." "You want to kill her?" Aspen gasped in horror. "Yes," Oak replied, hand on his sword. "What? Kill her?" Char nearly fell over. "Not at all! My friends, what if this is the answer?" "The answer to what?" Oak and Aspen asked at the same time. "Don't you see?" Char spluttered, waving his book like a baton. "The last time an unnaturally powerful Outlander like this entered the world, the chill arrived soon after." "So won't another one finish us all off?" Oak asked. "Destroy Northost for good?" "Or," Char said anxiously, "help us bring about something to combat the chill." "Combat the chill?" Aspen asked. "I believe Gwenevere's unborn child is our answer," Char replied. "This new child will help us do much good in Northost." "Fine, we won't kill her," Oak said, "but let's not think her child's going to be our savior just yet." "Let's just start by finding her," Char replied, and he darted from the room. "And somebody inform Mahogany about this. He should know."